Welcome, everybody, to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Cheng, and joining me, as always, is my buddy, Rudy Tamarchio. Rudy, it's championship week, but before we jump in, there was some crazy, weird, but kind of awesome news. Bill Belichick, formerly of the New England Patriots, apparently interviewed for the job that Mac Brown just resigned, got fired from over at UNC. What are your thoughts? How realistic is this? What is going on?
I saw this headline and started laughing because the first thing you think about with Bill Belichick, it's not college football, and it's
Yeah,
so
absolutely
different
not.
than the
Yep.
NFL. I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I've been watching a lot of podcasts these last couple of weeks. We have Julian Edelman's podcast is absolutely hilarious. And his Bill Belichick impression is fantastic. And then he brings on like Gronkowski and all the other former Patriots. He has Matt Light on all the time and they all dog on him. Let's be really plain and simple about this. Bill Belichick is a fantastic football coach. Nobody's going to ever take that away from the guy, but it's one thing to coach in the NFL and be a general manager in the NFL. It's
Yep.
another thing to be a college football coach where you have to recruit and appeal to 12 to, 18-year-old kids. Now, if
Yeah.
he would only go into the transfer portal and only do that and coach X's and O's, the other problem is the Patriot way or his system of developing talent that takes years to build. He's a guy that says, I'm happy to take quarterback and put him under my wing for a couple of years and work with a few different players. You maybe have 3 years with a group of players in college football. It's kind of like the opposite of Nick Saban. Nick
Right.
Saban went into the Miami Dolphins all those years ago and realized very quickly, wait, I have to answer to a GM. I can't get the players that I want. Wait, all these guys want to do is deal with like salary, but they don't take me seriously in the locker room because I'm not as big of an authority figure here as I am in college. To hell with this. I'm going back to college. I think it's the exact opposite to the NFL, where Bill is a guy that to do the same things he did in the NFL in college wouldn't work.
Yeah, it's funny you say all these things, and then I watched the Andy and Ari podcast last night right before I went to bed, just to kind of get a different view on this, right? Because I thought the same thing. I was like, this is not a sport that's built for Belichick. Like Bill, like I said, he likes it's which is funny. Like I'm gonna say all these things, and they're gonna sound counterintuitive. I'm gonna bring it around full circle. So I felt like Bill, like you said, he's used to working with players over years. He likes having a tight grip on both the GM position and the coaching position. But then as I started thinking about it, I'm like, I'm looking at this through the lens of 10 years ago. I'm looking at this through pre NIL, pre transfer portal, and the more I got to thinking about it, I was like, holy crap, this actually may be perfect for him. Here's where I say one, he's picking a phenomenal school to start at, right? He's starting in a Power Four, which I mean, everyone has their arguments about the ACC, but either way, it's still better than starting like at a G5 or a school in the Big 12 randomly. Not to poo poo on the Big 12, but they're not the ACC and they don't have the name recognition like the ACC does in terms of the schools. But he's picking a program that there isn't pressure to win off the bat. They will give him that time. So the time you're talking about of finding these players, yeah, maybe it takes him some time to get his fingers into the high school system and knowing these people. But I think because he has a name, which we were talking about in our recap show last week, about brand recognition and name recognition. We were talking about this. Remember about the coaches? I think he can really immediately jump in and start making a name for himself, mainly because he's used to dealing with talent on a year-to-year basis, if you think about it. With some of these football players and with a lot of the stars he had, you have Randy Moss for 1 or 2 years, which he didn't even win the Super Bowl then, but he got him for a year. He gets these random he goes from and he who was before Edelman? What was his name? The
Oh,
other short white guy.
Wes Welker.
Wes Welker. So he goes from a Wes Welker to an Edelman. So he knows how to fill slots in terms of getting like the same exact type of player for the other type of player, which is what you need in college once you have a system. He clearly has a system for winning. Now, Andy and Ari were arguing, was that more Tom Brady? Was that more Bill Belichick? Who knows? The argument can go on. It's like the chicken and the egg. Either way, I actually think this would be a great thing, not only for him, for UNC, but also for the ACC. I think this would actually bring some more relevancy back to the ACC. I mean, think about it. Again, we were talking about this the other night, right? Brand recognition, name recognition. What do you bring in? Imagine the name Bill Belichick attached to the ACC. Again, he could go 2-10 like FSU did this season. Who knows? He could go 6-6 his first season, start building up a program, and who knows? And this is my thing. I look at it like this. Nick Saban did really bad in the NFL because he was a college coach tailored for that time, which is why he's out now. He likes to have control. He likes to have that messiah complex where he is in control and everything he says is gospel and is like the law. I think Bill Belichick is similar in that sense, but he's used to working with egos. He's used to working with guys who want to get paid. So when you talk about college football, yes, 10 years ago, he would have actually fallen flat on his face, which is why he probably never got into it. But you think about now, and I almost am like, man, I feel like this is a slam dunk. With that said, and us going so far deep into this, do you wonder, because we always love to do it, put on our tinfoil hat, do you think this may be a bait and switch for UNC? Do you think they're bringing in Bill to maybe distract from someone they're actually talking to on the back end who may or not be coaching right now?
It's definitely just a PR push. I
Oh,
think it's
okay.
something that it's a PR push for Bill and for North Carolina, because if you could say, "Hey, you've got Bill Belichick interviewing in North Carolina," that's a big deal for them athletically. It's a good deal for Bill Belichick too, because he doesn't have any NFL coaching demand right now. After what happened with him in the offseason and seeing who he was interviewing with, and everybody passed over him, including the Atlanta Falcons, for example, this is great to rehabilitate his image, along with going on the roast of Tom Brady to show, hey, I have a personality. As you know, limiting as it is, it's very funny to see him have a sense of humor and to hear all these stories that come out afterwards. I don't see that personality transferring over to college players. It just really, I really don't. So I think it's a PR push on both ends, and whoever they end up hiring should be a pretty good hire because North Carolina is a big school. It's a matter of just, you're still stuck with hearing this what's the word I'm looking for? Like, there's this potential argument with UNC that's been there since Mac Brown's first tenure in North Carolina, where everyone in the ACC Tobacco Road corridor all believe that UNC is a sleeping giant in
Oh,
terms
yeah.
of being able to because of having the resources and the money and the donors. They think North Carolina should be a bigger football school than it has been. I don't see that changing anytime soon because you've gone through some great coaches. Butch Davis went there. Also, you're getting a lot of guys at the twilight of their career, so in
Yeah,
their prime, maybe
and
they
that's
can
what I
make
was
it
gonna
bigger
say. I
schools,
mean,
but
you're getting a Mac Brown, excuse me, you got a Butch Davis, but he was on his second leg because he was reeling from a horrible NFL career and stint. So it's like you're not really getting them at their prime. But again, what I think when you can get with Bill is you bring him in and you go, hey, you're going to be a facilitator. We want you to build systems. We're going to lean a lot on your OC and your DC to do a lot of the day to day grunt work stuff. I mean, look at Nick Saban. You go get a Mario, right? Yeah. How hard would it be for a great recruiter to want to go play for Bill Belichick? You know what I mean? Like in general, you know what I mean? Like I'm not looking at this as a player. I'm looking at this as a coach now too. You're telling me I could be under Bill Belichick's staff no matter where it goes. Who knows? And then on top of that, they're probably also thinking this guy probably won't be here forever. He may want to get back into the NFL. Maybe this is my ticket into getting to the NFL. So you can lure again. It can go either way. It can go sideways. This could all be a ruse, but it's what I thought it was originally. But the more I sat on it, the more I was like, wow. I mean, I think this could actually be a great thing for all parties involved, and it could really lead to something great for the conference in general. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, imagine every year, for the ACC championship, you've got Mario versus Belichick. You know what I mean? That would be a great matchup. I think. You know what I mean? So who knows? But enough about the news. We've got some games for championship week. I wanted to kick things off with probably the most controversial game out of all of them, which where we're going with this. We're going to go to the game in Charlotte, the ACC championship game. This game has multiple tiers of controversy attached to it, not only with Clemson getting in, Miami being left out. You've got a first year member in the ACC like SMU. You've got a what happens if Clemson wins? What happens if SMU wins? There's just so many different things. But we've got number 8 SMU taking on number 17 Clemson. Clemson has won 7 of the past 9 ACC championship games. They're looking to get 80% if they win this year. Rudy, what are some keys to the game? What are you watching out for?
So if Clemson were to have any shot at this, they would have to play extremely physical football because the one loss that SMU has is to BYU.
Yep.
Before Greg Jennings was their quarterback, but watching that game, live on TV when that was happening, it was just such a physical football game that
Yeah.
BYU had, and that's what SMU couldn't really handle. So if they were able to lean on Phil Maffa in that running game and also use Cade Klubnik as a runner as well, they might be able to make a game out of it. But to be honest with you, Clemson's been out physicaled in every matchup that they've had this year.
They
And
have.
shockingly enough, South Carolina wasn't that big of a shock. Georgia obviously wasn't a surprise, but that Louisville loss came as a big shock as a team
Yes.
that's not exactly very physical to begin with, but has a running game that's kind of similar to the one that SMU does. Because Isaac Brown's a fantastic running back, but if you look at Brashard Smith and a Miami transfer, they're kind of a similar size, similar build, similar speed. So I just don't see it being that physical matchup in the trenches that would benefit Clemson. I just see this as SMU doing what it does, and they're going to win the ACC in their first shot, and it's going to make all of us Miami fans sick.
Yeah, Clemson in its 4 worst games, the pass blocking was the main issue. When you look at when they played Pittsburgh, South Carolina, Georgia, and I think Louisville. Yeah, Louisville. They had horrible, horrible pass blocking, and SMU is 15. They rank 15 in pressures. They're going to get to Cade Klubnik. And Cade Klubnik does not play well under pressure. I mean, he can, dodge a little bit on his feet, but he's no Michael Vick. And SMU has 5 different players with 5 sacks and at least 30 pressures. Their leader, Elijah Robert, is 5th in the nation with pressures, and they rotate 9 guys who are just absolute beasts. So when you talk about that physicality, like this isn't just like, oh, some 300-pound lineman. These guys are actually creating uh like points of contention for offensive lines. You know what I mean? And so I just want it's funny because you look at SMU, you look at who they played, you're like, okay, kind of a cupcake schedule. Clemson, on the other hand, kind of a harder schedule, right? And so, yeah, did they fare as well? Absolutely not. They've got clearly have more losses. But you look at the physicality, and I feel like the more we talk about this, the more I read up on this, there is statistically, yes, there's a difference, but you also have to look at who people are playing. Because in the inverse, how does Clemson contain Brashard Smith? When we're
Yep.
talking about, you know, the pressure, Brashard Smith, former wide receiver who turned running back. I mean, this guy is super fast, and he's the only player with an above 80 ranking in both passing and rushing, and he actually grades at above 90. He's got 1,500 yards, 17 touchdowns. This guy's a beast. So it's like it's not just the physicality. It's like how do you stop these weapons?
Yeah, and remember,
It's go ahead.
so remember, it's a Rhett Lashley offense, so they run at a blistering pace. You're talking about they're looking to get 90 plays run offensively, almost over 100 plays a game because they run so fast when they want to. So it's not just a physical matchup for them to try to slow down that offense, but it's also just a conditioning matchup to understand that if you get broken for a big play, they're going to line up very quickly, and half of their big plays just come off misalignment.
So
So
how does Clemson stop SMU? Because they also have again they also have Kevin Jennings, their quarterback, who is a beast as well, and that guy can run, throw. I mean, he can do everything. I mean, he's obviously more of a pocket passer. He likes to throw. He doesn't always like to run, but he's got the physicality to do it. How do they stop them?
they have to get to him. It's one of those things where they have to try to force him to become a runner because the one glaring thing that sticks out in Jennings' resume, yeah, he wasn't the quarterback when SMU lost to BYU, but they narrowly beat Duke by the skin of their teeth by committing 6 turnovers in that game.
And they still won. That's the crazy thing. Again, the Duke game, 6 turnovers, still won. I think it's like one of like maybe like 4 games in the history of college football where someone had that many turnovers and still managed to win the game. Who do you got, Rudy?
I got SMU, man. Like it's one of those
Big,
things where I just
or do you
don't
think it'll be
see.
close?
Let's. The way I think it's going to go is I think it's going to be a close first half and SMU pulling away in the second half. I just think it's one of those things where they're not going to have enough reps to keep up. Granted, I don't know if the weather is going to be any issue in Charlotte. I don't know if it's going to be cold or if it's going to be warm. I don't think it's going to be any different than what they're practicing in Dallas right now. So the only thing you could say that could go against that goes against SMU in Charlotte is that it should be a heavily favored Clemson crowd.
Yeah, it should be
But
orange.
yeah, it should be an orange out in Charlotte. But SMU, they don't really play in front of a bunch of fans as it is most
Yeah,
of the time.
and
So it doesn't matter to them.
the weird thing is the line is 4.5. So I feel like that's not enough points, and I feel like they're just Vegas is doing that to kind of make it seem a little closer. I don't think it's going to be that close. I
Much
think,
rather.
and this is the reason why I don't think it's going to be that close. When you look at their common opponents, Louisville took care of Clemson in their own house at night when they're their strongest. That's like when Clemson, it's like Death Valley and the other Death Valley, right? And Louisiana handled them, throttled them. Then you look at who was it? Ah, man, what was the other team they played? Let me look this up really quick. Unless you can
Well,
remember.
two of their three losses are at home. So they lost to South Carolina at home. They lost to Louisville at home. The loss was to Georgia, but that was the neutral site.
Right. Pittsburgh. Was it Pittsburgh? Yeah, Pittsburgh. You look at Pittsburgh. Yes, they both beat Pittsburgh, but SMU, that was SMU's coming out party, and they
Yeah.
throttled Pitt, right? Clemson barely got by, and they got by only because Pitt couldn't tackle Kate Klubnik. That's it.
Right.
It
They needed
wasn't
a
like
50-yard run.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't like, oh, like they just, they got a drive and they did it. It was literally one play at the very end of the game. So when you look at these matchups and you're like common opponents and you just see what SMU's doing, yeah, it's very hard for me to believe that Clemson can pull this out. Not only that, but it's not like Clemson earned their way into this game, right? Which we'll talk about another team that kind of snuck into their championship game. And I think when that's kind of the opportunity, it's there's just a fire that you don't have that another team has. Like SMU has known and has been targeting this date, has been targeting this game. They know this is what's up. I don't know if Clemson still has that, but again, don't be surprised. Experience wins out 9 times out of 10, in my opinion. Like if teams that have been to a championship, teams that have played in a playoff versus teams who have never been there are not ready for the moment, they usually win, even if they're underdogs. And so we're gonna have to wait and see. I am also going to take SMU. I'm going to take them actually big by at least 10 points. I think they'll definitely cover the 4.5 spread. But again, I also would not be surprised if Clemson was able to just pull this out, which again, we can get into on a recap show of what that will do to the college football playoff, because that will be wild if that happens. Anyways, moving down the road to Hotlanta, we have the only championship game in the Power Four that is a rematch. We've got number 2 Texas taking on number 5 Georgia and Atlanta. Texas is a 2.5 point favorite. Last time these two played, it was a very one-sided affair filled with turnovers. It was I remember you texting me because I was taking my son or I was watching a movie somewhere and you're like, you get a pick, you get a pick, you get a pick. It was just like a turnover battle. What is going to be different going into this game as opposed to the earlier meeting this season, Rudy?
A few things are going to be different. One, I know Georgia was coming off of that loss to Alabama and was a little bit, had retribution in mind. It was earlier in the season. In this
Right.
case, we're kind of limping into this game because it has come off of this 8 overtime grudge match against Georgia Tech, where they come back and win that one. Texas is coming in, they come in off the win against Texas A&M, but at the same time, I just think they're the better team right now. They're just healthier. I think they're hitting on more cylinders. Georgia, every week, it's like you're finding a new problem with Georgia, and either they pull it out or they lose a game. So I'm thinking that the only thing that really plays into Georgia's advantage here is I think with Clemson is having a home crowd because you're playing in your own backyard.
Yeah, in Atlanta. Yeah, Texas needs to avoid going down early like it did earlier this season. They went down 23-0, which forced them to throw the ball 49 times. That's not a formula for winning. You know what I mean? Like if you're throwing the ball that many times, unless you have like an air raid system and that's your bread and butter, and like you're playing a really poor secondary like ours, you're not throwing the ball out that many times. You know what I mean? And I think Georgia's defense put up 7 sacks last time, and Texas has a left tackle who's questionable with an ankle injury. So like they really got to button up that front line and make sure they protect Quinn Ewers because he's also questionable. Now, with that said, I do give the advantage to Texas mainly because if Carson Beck goes sideways and doesn't and starts throwing picks or doesn't get to his receivers or receivers start dropping balls, they don't have a backup like Arch Manning.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And if Texas can utilize Arch Manning to pull like a Haynes King kind of thing on UGA, like I think they could actually really like take this game under their control. Like it won't be close because you saw what Haynes King did. I mean, when you watch the good old fashioned hate game, between Georgia Tech and Georgia, that game was very one-sided too. Georgia Tech looked great. And they looked like the more dominant team till Georgia kind of started pulling themselves back in. And then they got into it, obviously, in the second half, into the fourth quarter, and was able to take it to overtime. But when you look at what Haynes King did in that game, I mean, Georgia struggled against a mobile quarterback. Like they could not stop a nosebleed. So to me, I think, Georgia needs to like really kind of bring their defense, pin their ears back, get to Quinn Ewers, maybe force Manning to get in a system that he's not designed to be in. So get him maybe in earlier than he's supposed to be. I think Texas on the other side needs to get pressure on Beck, who had three interceptions in the first game, and Ole Miss, who sacked him 5 times and gave him an interception. There's a recipe to beating Georgia. There is.
Yeah.
The issue is, just like I was just hinting at with Clemson, is we're talking about a team who's been here before. And it's not a moment that they cower down to. Now, yes, have they lost to Bama 2 times in the SEC championship? Yes, but I just also feel like you've got a Georgia team who wants to win this. I feel like they do. I feel like they're a team that really, really wants to win the ACC. I mean, everyone wants to win, right? But I mean, there have been so many times this season that they could have just packed it up and said, you know what, it's not our night. It's not our game, right? And I'm wondering where Georgia's head's going to be at. Are they going to come out on fire like they did the first time they played Texas, and like how they played Clemson, second half? Um, or are they going to kind of come out how they did at Ole Miss, and like will Texas's D line be able to get in the backfield and just put Carson Beck on his butt? I mean, I think time of possession is also going to be crucial for both teams, and both need to get their running games going. So I think, oh man, what about field position? I was just thinking that too, because field position was huge the first time they met. How do you think that will factor in this matchup?
Similar, and it probably complements the turnover battle because if you're getting good field position, you might be just turning the ball. You're either if you're punting and pinning a team back, you're probably going to force a turnover, or if you're getting great field position, you just force turnover yourself. So for me, I think that makes sense, and it's a matter of how you cash in on those. I mean, look, Georgia really kind of figured out their offense in the second half and the fourth quarter against Georgia Tech, but at
Yeah.
the same time, I'm wondering what that officiating looks like because there was a lot of what's the word we're looking for that always gets Miami penalized? Offensive pass interference
Oh,
on pick routes. Yeah,
phantom
whole
route,
lot of that
phantom
was
pit.
was let go by an ACC crew in Athens last weekend. So I wonder how that's going to play into the SEC officiating this week.
Yeah, I think if Georgia and ETN can get their running game going and it can be solid, I think they stand a chance because games where Texas struggles with the run, they struggle in the games over UGA, Vandy, Arkansas. All three of those games, they struggled at containing the run and the rush. If Georgia can get a steady run, I think they can keep it close. If not, I'm with everyone else. I'm picking Texas. Who do you got?
Yep,
Texas too.
I got
That's what I
Texas.
Yeah, so that's what I thought too. Anyways, moving up north, James Franklin and the Nittany Lions are hoping that they can seize the big moment. Number 1 Oregon is taking on number 3 Penn State in Indianapolis. Oregon's favored by 3.5 points. What is this going to be a blowout game? I know you've been critical all season of the Nittany Lions. What are you thinking, Rudy?
Oregon's on a mission, man. I don't see this going any other way than just them beating the absolute snot out of Penn State because they have everything to play for. They really don't have many weaknesses left. Penn State, we've talked about, it's been a pretender pretty much all year. They've had a couple of, close victories against USC on the road that, looking back is still kind of they needed a lot of help to beat was what, a 6-win team, 5-win
Mhm.
team in the Trojans. And then looking at the circumstance of how they get into this championship game with an Ohio State loss to Michigan. I understand that like the whole Ohio State Michigan aspect rivalry game, anybody can lose on any given day, but this isn't a rivalry game. This is just a Big Ten game, and Oregon's been on that mission to claim the Big Ten in their inaugural year, and I don't see anything stopping that.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a battle of defenses. I think it's whose defenses hold up more. I think Abdul Carter and the Penn State defense could be a major threat to the Oregon offense. I think on the opposite side, Oregon has one of the best front seven, between when you grade out their D linemen and their linebackers, I think they're top 5 or top 10 in both. And so I think if they can stop that tandem of Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, it's a done zone. I think another area that everyone needs to focus on and watch is the red zone efficiencies. I think that's a key. Like, who is getting a touchdown? Who's getting a field goal? I think that's going to be crucial. Oregon has settled for field goals sometimes. Sometimes they haven't even been able to score in the red zone. Same thing with Penn State. So it's going to be like who can take advantage on the defense, and then as well who can make sure that those red zones become touchdowns and not field goals. I thought another key matchup would be their Penn State's tight end, Tyler Warren. They do some really funky stuff with this guy. Like they'll put him as a regular standard tight end. They'll put him out as a wide receiver. They put him in one play I saw as like a center who snapped it and then went out for a pass. Like Penn State has like a really crazy offensive coordinator who likes to do some really weird things. So I think if they can kind of do some things that like throw off Oregon's defense, maybe they get that. I think Drew Aller also needs to stay clean. I think if he gets under duress, if he's running around for his life, it's a wrap because I just don't see that many weapons on the Penn State side. Like when you think of Penn State, like, do you think of weapons? I don't. I thought Singleton would be better this year. I just, I got to go. I'm going to go Oregon, like convincingly. Like, I think Oregon will cover the spread. And I
Yeah.
just, again, James Franklin, that's just who he is, man.
It's
He's
also an indoor stadium. You're
Oh,
playing in
that's
a
true.
dome. So,
That's
like, in
true.
terms of like, if it's a Big Ten championship game, or you're talking about being like in the big house or being like in the horseshoe and it's the middle of December, okay, I can understand where like, Oregon, it gets cold, but it's Pacific Northwest. It's a little different than being in a Big Ten environment. But when you're in a dome in Indianapolis, that everything you need to know is right there.
Yeah, and I think if you also look at the like, not that the transitive property has been accurate this season whatsoever, but you Oregon beat Ohio State, who beat Penn State. And I know that's really stupid, but when you really look at those programs, I don't necessarily look at it as the talent on the field. I look at it at the coaching level, right?
Yep.
I just don't think James Franklin is built for these moments. I mean, I could be wrong. And when we do our recap video on Sunday or Monday, I will happily eat crow. But I just look at James Franklin and I'm just like, bro, you're not built for this, man. Like you're just not one
No.
of those guys. And so I'm taking Oregon, and I think you said you were too, right?
Absolutely, because if you're looking at the rest of their schedule, like if you look at Penn State's Big Ten schedule, it was nothing special at all. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, they lost to Ohio State, but they didn't have to play Michigan this year
Yeah.
in terms of
Oh,
how that
and
plays out.
cool fun fact, trivia time. Who is the only team that has beaten Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State in the same year?
The only team to ever beat Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn
Penn
State in the
State
same year?
in the same year. It's only one team. Do, 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 do,
Yeah, this
do,
is
do,
interesting.
do,
I'm tr
do, do,
Can you give me
do,
like a
do,
frame?
do,
Is this like a really
do,
long
do,
time
do, do,
ago?
do. No, actually, it was pretty recent. I think 2015 was the last time, and then 1999 was
USC.
the time before that. What?
USC.
Nope. Michigan
Okay.
State.
Huh.
Sparty.
Smarty. Yeah,
Crazy,
makes
right?
sense.
Right? I actually picked Michigan. I mean, Wisconsin. I was like, because I was thinking like Wisconsin had that run for a couple years where they were really like good. But yeah, Michigan State, only team in history ever
Makes
to
sense.
beat Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. So, anyways, there's a first time for everything, guys. A first time to be in a championship game, first time playing a team, and Iowa State and Arizona State will be checking both of those boxes off. Number 15, Arizona State takes on number 16, Iowa State and Dallas for the Big 12 championship. Iowa State has one of the worst rushing defenses, and you juxtapose that to the legend that is Cam Scatterbo, what is going to happen? This sounds like a recipe for disaster, but you can never count out the Cyclones, Rudy.
I mean, I will. I'll count them out right now. I'll count them out right now. I think watching Arizona State play, it's been like they have this date with destiny. And again, the way that they run the ball, the way that the way they stick around each other, like you've already played your most physical football of the year. This, I'm not going to say it's a cakewalk, but I think they win comfortably.
Yeah, I think that's why I let off with that stat and that little fun fact is because again, we've seen it all year. We've seen it in our losses, right? Time of possession and who can run the ball the most effectively is who's going to win the game, right? And again, that's obviously like, hey, keep your quarterback clean. You're going to win the game. You know, defenses get stops. I mean, obviously, these are duh sentences, but when you see them and you have a guy like Cam Scatterbo who is just like, by the way, coolest name in the world, Scatterbo, like, bro,
Yeah.
and he's a white running back. Like, I mean, it's hysterical and it's perfect at the same time. But yeah, I mean, you have a team that is on fire, pun intended for the Sun Devils. Um, I don't know, man. I'm seeing. So here's the thing: Arizona State's main wide receiver option, Jordan Tyson, is expected to be out. So it's like they're going to run it. So you're going to see Scottaboo get a lot of touches. Conversely, Iowa State is the only team in the nation with two wide receivers with over 1,000 yards, with Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. It's to me, it's like, okay, well, load the box up, and if you stop him, now load the box up and you still don't stop him, goodbye. Like that's going to be blowout central. You know what I mean? But when you lose your main aerial threat and you're known for running, it's very easy for defenses to come up with a game plan. You know what I mean? And Iowa State's quarterback, who has again another cool player named Rocco Becht, like that's the Rocco, like come on Rocco. Um, which by the way, like everyone should be saying that when they cheer for him. Um, has also thrown a touchdown in 16 straight games. Like that's nothing to sniff at, you know? So I want to say Arizona State big too, and like, and with like a underline and italicized mark. But at the same time, I'm like, man, this Iowa State team has been counted out so many times this season after each loss, and they lost games they probably should have never lost, but they made it here. And so I think it'll be closer than the experts think. I think it'll be very similar to the BYU game that Arizona State just had. I think it'll go down to the wire. I think it'll come down to one play. Don't be surprised if it's a shootout. You know what I mean? Because like I said, with Rocco having those two studs at wide receiver, I just don't know if Arizona State can stop. And I actually want to check something out. Do you remember by any chance how Arizona State did against BYU in terms of the aerial threat? Because like I feel like BYU really threw the ball around really well. I'm gonna look this up.
The only thing I remember
Yeah,
watching
dude,
that game.
BYU had 346 yards in the air. Like that's a great game aerial wise. Like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like if you're gonna throw the ball like that, I mean, yeah, 346 yards. I mean, it's not like
Good
their
stuff.
second,
I'm
yeah, it's not like their secondary is stout and they're stopping people. Again, that's not like their secondary is our secondary, so it's not like they're letting everyone through. Which I
it's
will all
really
day. I will absolutely talk trash about our secondary and
it's so hard
commensurate.
to watch, like, defense and be critical of other defenses after what,
You can't.
Miami's
We
secondary has
cannot do
done
it,
the
and
whole year.
I'm not going to sit there and pretend. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah,
because I already know the trolls are going to be waiting. They're like, oh, they're criticizing this secondary, but what about yours? And I'm like, all right, Tim,
yeah,
thanks. Let me
yeah,
stop you
but
there.
the thing is that historically, we are bred to know what a good secondary and a good defense is supposed to look like by being a defensive-minded football team for the better part of, 25 years. That's what
Absolutely.
made this year such a,
Anomaly. It was such an anomaly
yeah.
this year.
Th
Yeah.
this and the Al Golden defenses were among the worst since, Jimmy Johnson's first year at Miami.
Do you know what's funny when I was thinking about the Al Golden thing? Because I was watching Dan Le Batard and they were talking about how, was it Dan Le? No, I'm sorry. I was watching our boy Alex Dono. I was watching
No,
Locked
no.
On Canes and he was talking about, he's like, I totally forgot that D'Onofrio was married to Al Golden's sister. And then I thought about the Al Golden years and I'm like, God, how ironic is it that some of our worst years were under a coach called Golden? You can't even call it the golden era, like, because it really wasn't a golden era. You know what I mean?
Nope.
It's just so damn sad. Ah, anyways, the Smurf turf will be the spot for the revenge rematch. That's the second rematch we were going to talk about tonight between number 10 Boise State, who will be taking on number 20 UNLV in their home stadium in Boise, which, by the way, I know only G5 schools do this, but I think every school should do this. I think every conference, if you are the top seed in your conference, you should get home field advantage in a conference game. What are your thoughts on that first before we talk about this game?
I think the neutral site conference championship game has kind of gone like the way of former, like if you look at like the BCS era of college football, that's
Mhm.
kind of like where that all came from. And having like, remember the same title sponsor was around for the ACC and Big 12 championship games when it was Dr. Pepper back in the day. I think if you're looking at like realistically, I think only one conference can get away with doing that, and that would be the SEC, because I don't see the Big Ten really benefiting from having a game in Indianapolis in terms of being like a place to travel to for a neutral site game. I
Well,
kind of
I
agree with
think
you there.
I think in the sense that the Big Ten, I think maybe this is what you were trying to say, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But I think it's more advantageous for the Big Ten to have it in Indianapolis because it's a dome, and at this time of the year, who wants to go to Minnesota? Who wants to go to Ann Arbor? Who wants to go to East Lansing? Who wants to go to any of these cities this time of the year? You know, you would rather play indoors where there's less chance for injury, less chance for weather playing a factor in changing an offensive or defensive scheme up. So, but
But
any
play in a
other,
different dome. Don't play in Indianapolis. Like the thing I'm looking at is like when you think of like a Super Bowl
but
being
what
held
other
in
domes are in the
Indianapolis,
Midwest? What other domes do you have in the
uh,
Midwest?
I mean, you have your choice between like, I'm trying to think. You either have to go to
Detroit,
Detroit, you
Detroit,
have
Ford
to go to
Field.
Detroit or Indianapolis, or where is there another one? Minnesota, I don't
Minnesota?
think. Yeah, Minnesota. Yeah,
Yeah.
M&T Bank is a really nice one. The only problem is you're going to three Midwestern cities that really like if you want to rotate it, but I think it's been in Indianapolis for like the past,
Well, that's because
X number of years.
that's where the Big Ten's headquarters are. So that's
Yeah,
why.
well, that's
I mean,
part
I
of your
mean, the S. If
problem.
I don't even understand why the SEC isn't in Atlanta at this point, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, back to football. That was a great conversation. We should maybe talk about that in the offseason. Boise
Yeah,
State is looking to make it back-to-back wins against the Rebels. Strategy seems pretty simple for the Broncos. Give Ashton Genty the ball.
yeah,
But here's a
yeah.
question. How do the Rebels stop? They did pretty well. They held Genty to 128 yards, not his best showing, but he did run in the game-winning touchdown against the Rebels last time they played. How do the Rebels do it?
I mean, they have to stop Ashton Genty, obviously. I mean, that's all they can do, and also protect the ball themselves. That's the only thing I could think of because look, as weird as I've actually been there. I was, we played in our 2006 season. We ended up
The Computer Bowl,
finishing
right?
the year at the
Computer
MPC
Bowl, right?
Computers Bowl
Or
in
bowl.
Boise. Yeah, it
Ugh.
was. It's a small place. It's just that blue turf is the weirdest thing you've ever seen, and it gets cold, obviously.
The
So for me,
Smurf
it's
turf.
yeah, you talk about a desert environment going into the mountains, it shouldn't be that different. It's just a matter of this goes back to remember when we talked about like Ohio State and Oregon, should that have been the Big Ten championship game? And that they also could have met up again in the college football playoffs. So it's like how many times, how difficult is it to beat the same team multiple times in a year? If you're talking about like when you're talking about a big power five, power four conference team, yeah, it gets hard, but it's all about what your matchups look like. In this case, it's two group of fives playing against each other. It's still probably hard to beat the same team twice. So as much as I think Boise State will probably eke this one out, it's probably going to be a very similar kind of a matchup to where you won't see a whole ton of yards from Ashton Genty, which I wonder what that does to his Heisman stock, seeing as that's going to be the last game before the committee finally votes on it. And if he
Yeah.
doesn't have like this dominating performance, what are they going to do? But I think they find a way to give Ashton Genty the ball and a little bit more creatively to really try to showcase his Heisman numbers.
Yeah, a lot of people are picking UNLV. Um, because,
I'd be happy to
the
see it.
well, here's the thing. UNLV plays in the Allegiant Stadium, that dome in Las Vegas, and so they're not really used to elements. I mean, you're getting into a time of the year where the elements are the worst, barring, Miami in early September, late August, you know what I mean? So it's like how do they go from a dome to this inclement weather, you know? And then on top of that, they didn't beat them last time. Yes, they held Genty down, but he still got 100 plus yards, got that game winning touchdown. I think the other crucial factor which happened with UNLV is they allowed costly penalties to really screw them over. They had a defensive pass interference or holding call late in the game, which extended Boise State's drive, which could have been a punt. They could have gotten the ball back. And then there was an offensive holding, I think, in an earlier drive. And so it's like, do you play sound? Do you play disciplined football? I think if they can, I think again, you have that, inspiration, that motivation to want to get revenge. I think that's always a good thing. I think that always keeps people fired up. And then UNLV, it does have a pretty good defense, you know, especially against the run. So um, I still think I'm like with you. I think Boise State is going to eke out a win. They've kind of just figured it out. Even like when you thought they were going to go down a couple times this year, they just somehow pulled it out in the fourth quarter, and you're just like, God, I just keep seeing the
Yeah.
Breaking Bad meme where he's like, he can't keep doing this. Like, that's literally what I think of when I see Ashton Genty. I'm like, he can't keep running, but he does. And so I have Boise State in a close one. I'm going to say by 1 point. Um, but yeah, that's who we have. Any other things you want to talk about, Rudy, before we wrap up this championship week episode?
I've been so disconnected from college football playoff related everything this past week, and it makes me
I know.
wonder, should UNLV actually win that? Do they have a guaranteed bid for themselves to get in
Well,
to the
yeah,
playoff?
if
Will be
no,
5
that
champions?
is no, that is, I mean, yeah, because Tulane basically removed themselves by losing last week. So even if Tulane won, they wouldn't make it in because UNLV would still be ranked higher because they're not ranked. Army isn't ahead of them, so they wouldn't jump them, I think, even if they're ranked. So yeah, it's basically a win if you're in. All of these games are winning you're in, with the caveat of the SEC, ACC, and Big Ten. I think all of them each could possibly get both teams in. Which I'm going to save for a recap, but I do think no matter who wins, if SMU loses, win or lose, I think they're in as well. I don't think the CFP committee is going to screw over the ACC 2 years in a row because that would just be not good. But yeah, I think UNLV will absolutely be in, and then that just causes a lot more chaos for the CFP. So we will see come Sunday. But Rudy, we have made it to the end of the episode. Another one in the books. We are almost at the close of this season. We've got a few more episodes left as we head into the playoffs. Yeah, I don't blame you for not wanting to watch football. It's been very hard for me to stay motivated as well in this. It's brutal, but I do love the game. I still love the game. I'm going to watch these
Yeah.
games. And if anything, misery loves company. So I would love to see some of these teams either. The most important thing, what I would really love, and I don't want this to happen, but I would just love for this to happen, is if Clemson beats SMU and then screws Alabama out of the playoff. God, that would be
Yep.
so good. I would love that. I'd be like, well, you know what? Screw you. Here's something little question I want you to think about what are the chances that the committee changes their mind on UM? Because
See, this is
a lot of people have been politicking this week about the Bama decision, and I'm wondering if the committee meets again and they're like, we made a mistake and we want to rectify that mistake, and everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah, and the thing is, here's the thing. They have left themselves a little bit of wiggle room here by showing what the rankings look like on this end. Granted, not many teams have much to there's no games outside of championship weekend. So you have to see what those conference championship games look like in terms of how if they want to make any decisions, like how does the SEC make itself look worse in their eyes to say, well, you know what, we don't need to have Alabama in anymore. We will put in this two-loss Miami team with a better record against 500. All the stuff that Miami's been putting out, but it's a matter to me of how much politicking behind the scenes is happening because we've heard a little bit about it. And I think if it's any other team, this is my Miami homer hat. This is my tinfoil hat. Metallic fruit bowl terminology here, thinking it's if this was any other notable brand that was getting left out that didn't look as bad defensively, you probably have a better case. If you took the
Yeah.
name Miami out and just went and looked at the resumes themselves and you looked at the rankings of how they, performed like number one offense in the country, Heisman finalist quarterback, a defense that looked more funny enough, a defense that's looked worse to the eye test than it does statistically. I don't know how that is other than just an indictment on defense in college football overall
Right.
in this current landscape. Miami's in. And
Yeah.
that's where, if you just take that piece, sure. I mean, look, they love drama and they've changed their minds at the final selection show
Yep.
multiple times.
I have a
But to do
theory
that
on
against
this. I have a theory on this. I'm gonna save it for our recap show and our playoff prediction because we're gonna have Rudy and I are gonna come up with who we think is gonna make the playoff and what the bracket's gonna look like. But
yeah.
thank you for making it to the end, y'all. Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think. Were our picks right? Did you agree with us? Did you disagree with us? If you're a bot, keep on botting, keep trolling us. We love that. Helps the algorithm, helps push us up. Until next week, or we should say until Sunday or Monday, be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And as always, go Canes.
And go Canes volleyball. They play tonight NCAA tournament against South
Let's
Dakota
go.
State.
Bam. We'll see you guys later. Be good.